And we're back here at Boom and Bust. My guest is David Boudeweel. He is the CEO of Boudeweel Public Affairs in Montreal. David, I'd love to get your take on sort of Quebec attitudes. First of all, to Bill C-69, that's the federal piece of legislation that really governs whether a new energy project will come to fruition. And now, of course, we've got Bill C-5, which is just been passed in the Canadian Senate, which talks about major projects going ahead. I'd love to get a sort of a Quebec understanding and angle on where we stand on those things.
Well, Quebec definitely prefers the new Bill C-5 to what Bill C-69 was. Bill C-69 was seen in Quebec as an encroachment of federal powers on the way Quebec could deal with different natural resource projects. It basically gave a veto to endless consultation to the federal government, which was something that was never going to fly in Quebec. Also, at the same time, it didn't recognize the provincial capacity to do the environmental assessments. So basically, they said, well, you can do whatever assessment you want. And I remember Minister Guilbeault said that. You can do whatever appraisal you want. In the end, you're still going to have to do the federal one, which was kind of a little bit more, cumbersome. Quebec even considered joining, I think, Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan in kind of a legal purview or legal challenge at the constitutional level of Bill 69. In the end, they didn't do it, but they strongly considered that. Bill C-5 now recognizes the capacity of provinces to publish and to run environmental consultation. And then when it's done, the federal maybe doesn't have to do another one on top of the provincial one. So I think this flies pretty well in Quebec. Also, the consideration in Bill C-5 for interprovincial projects to speed them up, to have more facility to do that. Quebec will look at it favorably in terms of export of hydro and maybe other energy produced. But still, it's not a blank check to have an energy east pipeline kind of project, but it definitely gives more wiggle room to provinces, including Quebec, to promote projects in which they believe.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like on Bill C-5 that Quebec is sort of willing to have the discussion at least. I know there's implications, whether the federal government will run roughshod over provincial interests and also Indigenous interests. So we're all waiting to see what happens with that. But it sounds like Premier Legault and his government is at least willing to have that conversation. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think one indication that showed that is that during the last conversation between the premiers, just before the G7 summit, Quebec didn't oppose being part of those discussions. Premier Legault even made a declaration that, well, we want to make sure that projects that are in the national interest of Canada could be in our interest as well. But we want to make sure that our interests are aligned as much as possible. So a lot of the confrontational chatter is definitely down since Mark Carney became prime minister. And also, honestly, the impetus to that was the significant pressure from the U.S. administration, not only in Canada itself, but on its provinces in terms of trade and commerce.
True. Give us a rundown. There's a crisis across the country on infrastructure, getting that public infrastructure or even private infrastructure approved. What's the state of play in Quebec itself when it comes to the infrastructure deficit?
Well, first, the assessment of that there is an infrastructure deficit is as true in Quebec as everywhere else. Maybe a little bit more even for larger cities. Like Montreal is a complete mess. You still have some water pipes, some wooden water pipes from the early 20th century. So all those crazy things. There's definitely a deficit in infrastructure, and arguably we've built too much infrastructure over the last few years, which makes the maintenance of existing infrastructure even more complicated and difficult. And in Quebec, you have a little bit the same, like a lot of people, not in my backyard, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. But there's been a recognition, especially on housing and other sectors, that municipalities need to have a little bit more power to have possibilities to have either buildings or to be able to renovate and maintain infrastructure more efficiently. So I think there's definitely a sea of change that. And one of the reasons is that infrastructure costs have become so high that you cannot add endless consultations on top of that because it makes some of the projects unmanageable. So the current provincial government is well aware of that, and they want to make sure that they can do as much as possible.